program is the Active Center. It's created by David Sappe.
Pronounced Seppi.
Pronounced Seppi.
Okay, let's talk about the word liberal. I mean, it is one of the most loaded terms in politics today, right? It gets thrown around as an insult, people wear it like a badge of honor, it's all over the place. But what if I told you that its real meaning has almost nothing to do with modern political labels? As we're about to see, the true definition is so much bigger and way more fundamental than you probably think.
So yeah, let's just ask the big question right up front. In this crazy polarized world we live in, when you strip away all the noise and the cable news shouting matches, what does liberal actually mean? Well, we're going to find out that the answer has been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
You see, at its heart, liberalism isn't just one single thing. The best way to think of it is like a family of ideas, and they're all built on these three huge pillars: liberty for the individual, equality for everybody, and this really radical idea that a government can only rule if the people it's governing say it's okay.
And here's the best way to wrap your head around it. Don't think of liberalism as a political party. Think of it as the architectural blueprint for our society. Seriously, it's the design that things like the US Constitution are built on. It's kind of like the basic operating system for most of the modern democratic world.
So if liberalism is the architecture, then what are the building codes? What are the non-negotiable rules that hold the whole structure up? Let's dive in and unpack these core principles.
So what are these building codes? Well, there are 6 main ones. First up, individual liberty. That's just a freedom to think for yourself and live your life. Then equality, the idea that the rules apply to everyone, no exceptions. You also have economic freedom, like the right to own stuff. And to make all that work, you absolutely need the other 3. A government that has its power kept in check, the rule of law that's above everyone, and a democratic system where, at the end of the day, the people are the boss.
Okay, so those are the big ideas. But how do you take those principles and turn them into actual practical rules for society? Let's get down to the blueprint and see how this whole thing is built out in the real world, both in our politics and in our economy.
This brings us to a huge question. Where does my freedom end and yours begin? Well, liberalism has a really elegant answer. It's called the harm principle, and it basically says this: you are free to do whatever you want, right up to the point where what you're doing causes significant harm to somebody else. That's the line in the sand that protects both you and everyone around you.
And hey, this isn't some new idea. The philosopher John Stuart Mill laid it out perfectly. He argued that the only good reason for the government to step in and use its power against you is to stop you from hurting other people. It's a really simple concept, but it's an incredibly powerful way to limit government overreach.
So, how's this work in real life? Well, let's take freedom of speech. The harm principle says that even if a massive majority of people find an idea totally offensive, they can't just use their power to shut it down. And why not? Because censoring that minority causes direct harm to their liberty. It's like this protective shield that liberalism puts around every single person, even from the will of the crowd.
Now, let's look at the economic blueprint. This whole thing rests on 3 key ideas, all designed to protect your freedom in the marketplace. First, private property, making sure the state can't just walk in and take your things. Second, the free market, where competition sets prices, not some government official. And third, decentralization, which is all about shifting economic power away from the government and into the hands of individuals and businesses.
Right, so these ideas didn't just pop out of nowhere. They were dreamed up by some seriously brilliant thinkers who were trying to build a better, freer world. So let's stick with our metaphor and meet a couple of the chief architects of liberalism.
So on the political side, you've got John Locke. He's the guy who gave us this game-changing idea that governments even exist in the first place only to protect our natural rights, life, liberty, and property. And then on the economic side, you've got the one and only Adam Smith. He was the biggest champion of that free market blueprint we just talked about, arguing that competition is what makes a society wealthy.
But of course, ideas never just stand still. History came along and threw a massive curveball that sparked a huge debate right in the heart of liberalism. And it caused the whole philosophy to split into 2 different branches that, believe me, we can still see very clearly today.
And that curveball? It was the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it created unbelievable wealth, sure, but it also created crushing poverty and awful working conditions. This whole new reality forced liberals to ask a really tough question. What good is having liberty if you're too poor or powerless to actually use it? And that question kicked off a huge fight over what a right even is.
And this debate is where everything splits. On one side, you have what are called negative rights.
Think of these as a leave me alone list for the government, like freedom of speech. But on the other side, you have positive rights. Think of these as a to-do list for the government, things it should provide, like a minimum wage or public education. And I'm telling you, this one disagreement, what government should leave alone versus what it should provide, is the key to understanding just about all of modern politics.
So the branch of liberalism that really embraced these positive rights kept on evolving. In the early 1900s, the big fight was for economic protections, stuff like labor reforms and the New Deal. Once many of those battles were won, the focus started to shift in the late 20th century towards social justice and civil rights. And that's a trend that's still going strong today, with a major focus on making sure all minority groups have equal protections under the law.
Okay, so we've gone through the history, the principles, and this massive split. Let's bring it all home and connect these dots directly to the political world we see every single day.
Let's go all the way back to that question we started with. What does liberal really mean today? Well, when you look at it through this historical lens we've been using, the answer is, honestly, it's pretty shocking. In purely technical, philosophical terms, both of the major U.S. parties, Democrats and Republicans, are fundamentally liberal. Yep, you heard me right, both of them. They are both operating inside that same foundational architecture we've been talking about this whole time.
Wait, how is that even possible? Well, just look at how much they agree on. Both parties operate within a constitutional democracy. Both support private property in a market economy. Both agree that individual rights exist. They're basically playing in the same sandbox. The gigantic, fierce arguments we see every day, they aren't about the foundation of the house. They are almost all about the scope of those positive rights, the fight over how much the government should do for people.
And this isn't just an American thing. Not at all. Liberalism, in all its different flavors, is without a doubt the most successful and widespread political idea on the entire planet. The governments of the UK, France, Germany, South Africa, so many more, they're all built on this same liberal foundation. Which leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. If the foundational blueprint is pretty much the same, if both sides are technically liberal, then what in the world are we all really arguing about? It kind of suggests that our biggest fights aren't about the architecture of the house itself, but about how to furnish the rooms inside. Something to think about.